she's having surgery tomorrow, so they're not going to be here. So it's probably going to be a slim crowd tonight, which is fine. It's fall break. Next week's fall break for the county and city, but we'll be here. I think this week impacted us more than hopefully next week will. And then we have a closed group beginning on the 19th. Yeah, so we're excited about that. So tonight we're going to talk about the circle principle real quick. I know that we're all familiar with the circle, right? ReEngage. But tonight, what really is the purpose of the circle, which I think is really important for us to know going into our closed groups and even open groups, and how to allow our couples the balance of focusing on self and stepping outside of their circle. Sometimes they have to in a God-honoring way as well. So sometimes we are going to have to direct them into that way. So that's kind of the goal of these notes that you have in front of you. So how did you guys like or dislike the principle of the circle? Did it help in your closed groups?
Mm-hmm.
A visual, what other way?
Good boundary to start with.
Mm-hmm.
Good boundary.
Yeah. Did you have to say, hey, get in your circle? Like,
they would tell each other.
Mhm.
So we didn't have to do
that, yeah, that's what happened with ours. I mean, eventually they really catch on to the concept really quickly, and I think it helps us as leaders to be able to say, remember your circle, or
Mhm.
them too. It's a good common language. I think the Pence said that on their video.
Mhm.
Like, we just have a common language now, and it helps in that. So this circle comes out of Matthew 7, 1 through 5. I'm going to read that real quick. This is the concept of it, and this is where the circle principle comes from. And it says, do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you will judge others, you will be judged, and with the same measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to another brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there's a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will clearly remove the speck from your brother's eye, which is Jesus' words. And so I think that brings us to a humble place. And so this is definitely what the circle does. It brings humility, like, okay, let me focus on me before I look at my spouse. But there can be problems with the circle, and you may have encountered this in your close group, is that when a spouse is living in a habitual sin, or they're continuing in sin, we don't want the other spouse to think, oh, I better stay in my circle, not address this issue. That's faking peace, right? We learned that in the communication chapter of withdrawal. Like, especially if you're a withdrawer and you don't want to address an issue, then that can really fake the peace. Where sometimes, especially if adultery or abuse or, just anger, just this habitual sin that the spouse is aware of, and they continue to live in it, and the other spouse is being affected by it. So just keep that in mind when you are leaving a closed group, where they may think that. They may think, okay, I just need to stay in my circle and not really address any of the issues that are going on. And that's not what the circle is about. So just remember that, because there can be that problem with that. So the purpose, though, I want to read what they say. The purpose helps us explain Matthew 7, right? We went over that. It helps individuals focus on what they can change themselves. I think it does a great job of that. Like, you can't change him, which I think that's a good point to say to them. And the circle helps them see that they have a part to own. Mm-hmm. And the best thing they can do is focus on that part, and it helps people see the value of humility. Down on your notes, it says the progression of the circle. I found this very interesting, that in the lessons it kind of says step by step on the lessons of when it focuses on you and your circle. So you can look through those. Lesson 2 introduces the circle. This might be a good night to talk about this. Say, hey, this is the circle. Sometimes you know, we do have to step out when there's a sin that's going back and forth, or give them some teaching on the circle the first night. But typically, you are instructing them to stay in their circle. And lesson 4, I'm not sure, I wanted to point this out, this isn't on the handout, but on lesson 4 on humility, on question 3, that's the first time that they look outside of their circle. So question 3 in lesson 4 on humility is the first time that the spouse is actually asked to look outside their circle, which is interesting. They said that on our video on that lesson, and it says that's when you speak in the behavior of the spouse. And then question 5 is the action. So they'll say, hey, this is the behavior that I see, and then in question 5 they're going to try to change that behavior, the other spouse. And so this lesson can really, people do not answer the question they said, or it causes conflict, because that is when they're trying to really look outside the circle. Does that make sense? So just when you lead the closed group, just be aware.
Closed group or open group?
Closed group, yeah.
Which lesson? 4?
Lesson 4 on
Gotcha.
humility. Is when you that's the first question that looks into the behaviors of the spouse. So the full picture of the circle, it says that 90% of the time we are focusing on ourselves in ReEngage. So we are focusing on changing self. And then Psalm 139 is an amazing psalm. Search my heart, O God, point out anything in me that offends you, to lead me to everlasting life. Continue to point them to that. So there are times where you're going to have to step out the circle, like I said before, such as if there's adultery or abuse or habitual sin, pornography, something that the spouse, they know they're living in sin, they continue to do it. And so you may have a spouse come to you and say, hey, I just caught and saw my spouse into pornography, or a text from another person, or I got hit last night. Those are types of things that the spouse could come to you directly. So that's going to make them have to step outside the circle. But first, these are some great tools for you guys to remember when you guide them to step outside their circle. So one is, remember that they need to own the things that they need to own. Okay, what's the log in your eye? What is it about this situation that angers you? Like, where is your heart in this matter, and how do you see yourself as enabler to this? Or, you know, allow them to see their sin or what their motive is before talking. Because if they're very angry and they're like, I can't believe he did this to me, then that's going to come out in their conversation. So, hey, let's bring them back to humility and see that sin is sin. How can we help that spouse in that? And so, because they need to remember that they are one with that person, that they're their helper, not how they're not enemies in this moment, even though you feel like it. And remember, they cannot change your spouse. Only God does that. So these are great reminders for them. Look, you're not here to fix him or this person. We care about their soul. And we care. And the reason that we want to help this person is because we truly want them to be pointed to Christ. Like, that's the purpose. In that is where marriage and restoration begin to heal. So first and foremost, we want to know that God changes. We plant seeds to point them to Christ. And then when they come into humility, their communication is going to get better. Their attitude, tone, timing, words matter in that. So there's some more things, stepping outside your circle when they do own it. Say, look, this is my part in this. I've been enabling it. I've been faking peace and sweeping this under the rug and allowing this to happen, knowing, and please forgive me of that. So I'm just a good example. On their log, and they say that to their spouse. And then communication, remind them, like, look, I'm seeking to understand you. Like, communication is to understand, right? Not to respond or blame or invalidate, escalate, withdraw, those types of communication things we learn at ReEngage. So allow them to understand by asking, encourage them to ask questions. Like, how can I help you? What is it that I can hold you accountable to? Their heart is hard, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But be specific. Tell them that when you did this, this is how I felt. When I saw this text message, I felt rejected. Instead of, I can't believe you did that. You know how it goes. You are blank. You're validating, criticizing, which would be their fleshly response. So we guide them back to this. If the other spouse's heart's hardened, they're not listening, they're rejecting truth, you widen the circle. So you bring in the church. We've already had this happen a couple times at ReEngage. Like, we've had to pull in the church, like life group leaders, closed group leaders, Heath, the discipleship pastor, biblical counselors. So they're receiving truth on all ends. Now, whether they change is up to them. But that's scripture. If you go to them with the offense and they reject it, bring in someone else. Not your mama, not your best friend, people who are biblically wise, and encourage that. And then if that doesn't happen, bring in us. Bring in the church, the counselors, and that's how that's what that means when it says widen the circle. So take ground in your own life to where you need to grow as a completer with your spouse and peacemakers with others. Help your couples understand from the beginning what the circle principles is and is not. That's why I say in the beginning, really explain this to them. The conflict field guide is great. We use that in our closed group. I emailed it out to our people. It's I think it's from the book, The Peacemaker. It's really good. So, and then reflection for you guys. You can do this at home. How are you doing in having a biblical view of your circle? It's just important. As we lead, they want to imitate us. And so as we lead, they're going to be saying, okay, well, I own this, but this is how this offends me. So they're watching how we resolve the conflict as well biblically. Do you never get out of your circle? So are you a peacemaker? Or do you get out too soon or too often and try to fix the other person, which breaks peace? So I thought that was interesting, because you will get out of your circle too soon because anger or your feelings take over, or too often, and that's when we're trying to fix and change the person. So I'm going to ask you this: what changes do you need to better help your couples have the right view of the circle? So do you feel like your couples understood this, or is there anything today that you guys were like, oh yeah, I should have implemented that?
We covered it pretty good and everybody got it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wonder if we start talking about times to step out of the circle. I wonder if we should take a couple of those rings and cut them so that you're not really stepping out of your circle as much as you're bringing your circle into theirs to work on the situation. Like I said, you're one. Your sins affect me. We gotta work on this together.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think when the circles are together, right? You're here, they're there, but they're united. I mean, that is an indication of, look, I'm helping you. We're on the same team. We're not separate here. We're together, and I'm your helper, is what they say. And what I have found is a lot of couples don't have that view. They just don't have the view of, I'm here to help point you to Christ. I'm here to help point you to Christ. And if we can get them to realize that, then, your motives change in an argument. It's like your pride comes down, humility comes up, and like, okay, this is my part in this. How can I help you be more like Christ? I think that's the end goal anyways. Like in ReEngage. I think that's what the last two chapters are on. So yeah, that is a good point.
Yep.
And to be able to share that with them as well. Yeah.
We typically don't have a problem getting people to step into somebody else's circle. It's usually it's hard. We almost have to teach them to stay in your circle because otherwise, I mean, every time we've done intense counseling with a couple, we're spending like 80% of our time stay in your circle. You know, let's talk about your spec. You know, your log, and so that's why it's like they're coming to us just immediately blaming and believing the worst about their spouse, and so. That's really where we spend a lot of our time is really about staying in your circle and trying to help them see their own sin and trying to give grace as Christ has, you know, given us so much grace. And so, like you say, it's hard to do that when the moments are intense and when there's just major conflict or a major situation. People just want to jump outside that circle because that other spouse is who's causing the trouble, you know, and they want to fix, you know, you got to fix them. If you don't fix them, we're not gonna make it, you know. That's what they.
Which I love the way they said that it breaks peace.
Right.
It does. When you jump out too quick, I mean, you're just
Right.
going to harden the heart of that other spouse. They're not going to listen, and Jesus didn't do that. He wasn't aggressive in that way because of selfishness. He truly had eternal mindset, which is important. And then, though, when you stay in your circle and you're not addressing a sin issue, then you're a peace faker.
Sure.
And so that's just as important because then you're enabling them to live in sin. And that's no better than beating them over the head trying to change them.
Yeah.
Usually you're also sinning as well, because you're usually creating some type of bitterness or resentment.
That's
towards
right.
them for that sin.
Yeah.
That's true.
Because it's okay. I mean, God was angry, right? I mean, there's a righteous anger and an unrighteous anger. That's another lesson. But like, the righteous anger is, I'm angry that you are living in sin. Like that. Yes, I'm angry that you are into pornography or adultery or abuse. I mean, that should anger a spouse. But why does that anger you? And I feel rejected. Okay, all right. Well, let's let God meet you there. But why else are you angry? Is it because of that person has sinned against God? Like eternity? Their soul is in jeopardy to spend eternity with Jesus? And to get them focused on that. If they're both focused on that, it's a beautiful marriage. and it's not going to be. It's not going to be. We're all going to be. That's why I love this self-reflection of, we all jump out of our circle too quick. And we all stay in our circle too long. And so to understand that it's kingdom-minded, it's important to get them there.
Yeah.
And I feel like the book does that well in the way it's laid out. So, anything else? No? All right.
6
Just
o'clock.
read over this and keep it with you because it's really good to help you explain the circle to your people. All right. Yeah, I'm going to give you one. All right.
Whoever's watching this, I'm gonna give them a look of everybody. The Keelers, the Coles, the Grave.
Yes.
Glenn coming?
He's working.
Okay, he's working.
Well, he's working on.
Our man running AV.
He's working on a house.
Adios.